Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast. And today we are going to talk about the first round of the NFL draft and what players I think are going to offer you immediate fantasy value and what guys you don't need to worry about because they are not going to matter this year. So anyway, stay tuned. Check it out. Here we go.
Listen up. It's time for the Fantasy Maverick podcast, starring the guy who's going to help you win that fantasy championship, Jimmy Maverick.
Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast. And before I begin, I want you to look and see that, holy cow, I'm clean cut again. That's right. Last year, I got a haircut on the weekend that the country shut down for COVID. And I told myself that I was not going to get a haircut again until after I got the vaccine or this thing was all over. Well, I got my 2 doses of the vaccine last week was when I got the second dose. And so I'm like, well, that's it, man. It's coming off. So there you go. Whoop, whoop. Yeah. I got to say, it is a lot easier to maintain now that it's all short. And my hair just does insane things when it gets long, as you can see from my prior videos. But anyway, hey, we had some stuff happen this weekend, man. We had a draft. Had the NFL draft, so it was very exciting to see a bunch of new players heading to new destinations. And today I want to talk about the first round, but I got to tell you, I haven't looked too much into the later rounds, but the second and third round, just reviewing it, not a lot of fantasy impact amongst the players that were selected. Like, you know, the wide receivers being selected, we're coming into either where they're going to be the third or the fourth receiver on that team. That usually means that they're not going to get enough volume to be fantasy relevant, so there's not a lot of impact there. But there's a ton of impact on those first round players, and so I wanted to go over all the fantasy players in the first round that have some fantasy relevance and who you should be keeping your eye on this year for your draft. Also, man, this season it's the first time ever 6 fantasy players drafted in the first 6 picks. Wow, that is really awesome. So I was very happy to see that. So let's just get right to it, man. Let's just start to it. With the number 1 pick of the 2021 draft. A guy they say is a generational talent, best quarterback to enter the league since Andrew Luck. That will be Mr. Trevor Lawrence, who you know right now is going to Jacksonville, as everyone knew and expected coming into this thing. And right now, I got to tell you, man, his projections look really good. I mean, he's going onto a team which has really good fantasy assets. You've got James Robinson there. You've got the new running back, who we'll talk about in a little bit, Etienne. You've got DJ Moore. You got Laviska Shenault. And so there's some talent here. There's going to be some ability to create some fantasy value. And Trevor Lawrence right now is projecting very well. ESPN has him projected with 4,216 passing yards, 23 touchdowns, and 288 rushing yards, 3 additional rushing touchdowns. That basically projects him to be the quarterback 12 this season, which is great. That's a QB1 right off the bat, QB1 rookie coming in. And the great part about this is right now his draft position on draft boards does not reflect this. He is currently the 22nd quarterback being selected off of most drafts at pick number 191. So really for most drafts, he's not even being drafted, because he only go out to maybe pick 180. So I got to tell you, man, this is a screaming value in my book. Would I take this guy as my QB1? And I would say yes, I would take him as my QB1. I always love trying to wait as long as possible to take your quarterback. And if I could wait till the very end of the draft to take my quarterback, that would be great. Now, I do expect him to move up from here, and he should. But even so, I don't see him moving past about maybe the 15th or 16th quarterback coming off the board. So even so, he's still going to be a guy you're going to be able to get in the 130s, something like that. So I am absolutely all in on Trevor Lawrence this year. Fantastic value quarterback with upside, paired with Urban Meyer on a talented offense that has assets, that has offensive assets. So I got to say, man, up, yeah. Trevor Lawrence, put him on your list now. I think he is a great choice. Now, the other two quarterbacks that were taken early, Zach Wilson going to the New York Jets, Trey Lance going to San Francisco. I got to say, actually, with all the other quarterbacks taken in the first round, because there was 5, right? There was also, who was it? It was Justin Fields was taken by Chicago, and then Mac Jones taken by New England. All of these guys do not appear to project into the top 12 quarterbacks. So as far as I'm concerned, they're not fantasy relevant. You can pick them up. I usually don't draft a second quarterback. Maybe you're in a 2-quarterback league or a dynasty league. Yeah, these guys are worth picking up. But the highest rated one I have was Fields, right? Fields going into Chicago. He will be the starting quarterback to start the year. But even so, he's only projecting in as like the QB-18. So not a fantasy relevant player. You're not going to be able to start the guy. So why waste a roster spot? Why waste a draft spot on taking him? Trey Lance and Mac Jones, those guys aren't going to be coming in until probably midseason, because you got Garoppolo in San Francisco, you got Cam Newton in New England. How long are they going to keep their jobs? Maybe they'll keep it for the whole year. Maybe these guys won't even start in their rookie year. So again, just stay away from all the other quarterbacks, the rookie quarterbacks, as far as I'm concerned. Trevor Lawrence is the guy you need to circle on your draft board. All right, so let's move on. Now, the next guy I want to talk about, again, awesome fantasy value right now. Kyle Pitts, tight end at Atlanta. Again, another generational level talent at the position. Now, tight ends are not normally a position where I want to take a rookie. It takes a while to develop those positions. They're usually not relevant until season 3. But it's not that tight ends can't have a fantasy relevant season right off the bat. I mean, in I think it was 2017, Evan Ingram, in his rookie season, he ended up with 64 catches for 722 yards and 6 touchdowns. Gronk, in his rookie season, he got 42 catches for 546 yards, but 10 touchdowns. Both those guys were fantasy relevant. And so one of the things about the tight end position is it's such a thin position. And the volume is so low on these players that somebody getting 700 yards and 5 touchdowns can be a top 6 tight end. Last year, if you took Ingram's stats, he would have been like the tight end 3. Okay. So, again, it's not a high bar to achieve. And right now, ESPN has him projected with right now 65 catches, 759 yards, and 5 touchdowns. That would make him the tight end 4. He is currently being selected as the tight end 13 at pick number 131. So that is screaming volume to me. That is value. He's going to get enough volume to be fantasy relevant, not only fantasy relevant, but a top tier tight end for your fantasy team next year. Now, one of the big drawbacks against him is that you still have Hayden Hurst on this team. Hayden Hurst is still gonna take some volume away from Pitts, and I'm sure there'll be games where they don't utilize Pitts, that it'll be Hurst getting all the targets. But I'm willing to risk it to take Kyle Pitts at this value position, and I also expect him to move up. The tight end 13 just seems way too low for him right now. But I certainly don't see him moving up into the top 5. He's going to be a value play here. So Kyle Pitts, right there, another guy you need to put on your list for your fantasy football targets this year. He is absolutely worth the pick right now. Now, the next guys that came out were a couple of elite wide receivers, and while I think that the long-term prospects for these guys is very good, we're talking rookie year. We're coming into new situation, professional level football, and there's always an adjustment period. Now, last year we had all of these. We had what they called the greatest rookie wide receiver class ever enter the NFL, and yet when all was said and done, only 3 of them were fantasy relevant. All right, so you had Chase Claypool, CeeDee Lamb, and T. Higgins were the 3 rookie wide receivers that actually ended up with a fantasy relevant season last year. Now, I do like these two players that were taken. You had Jamar Chase taken 5th overall to Cincinnati. You had Jaylen Waddle taken 6th overall to Miami. And one thing I really like about these guys is they have played with their quarterback before. They are going to the team that took their quarterback last season. So there's already an established relationship. There's already established trust. That's going to speed their ability to adjust into the offense and certainly gives them some value as far as where they're being picked. Now, the first one, Jamar Chase, who's going to Cincinnati, obviously he's played with Joe Burrow before, which is great. They're projecting him right now with 71 receptions, 893 yards, 5 touchdowns. That makes him a low-end flex. And he's currently being taken as wide receiver 36th overall at pick number 96. Now, it sounds pretty good. It sounds like he's got a little bit of value there, which is a good spot for him to be right now in these initial rankings. But when you look at who's going around him, you've got guys like Jarvis Landry, Jerry Jeudy, Hollywood Brown. All those guys are going right at around the mid-90s for ADP right now. And frankly, I'm more inclined to take one of these established players than I am to take a new player. And it's just because they're more familiar with the offense. They're more familiar with their quarterback. You know, there's a number of reasons to take these guys, but because of that, I can't really recommend putting Jamar Chase unless he falls. You know, if he falls a little bit further on the draft board, that'd be great. I don't expect him to, though. But frankly, I mean, I'd rather have one of those guys than Jamar this season. That's not to say he's not going to be a guy I'm going to be looking for in 2022. Jaylen Waddle ranks even worse right now. Obviously one of the big issues is, can you trust Tua with the passing game? You know, his yards per catch was like the lowest in the NFL last year. And obviously that's because he didn't have a lot of great receiving talent there. But he's currently right now at ADP 140, the 50th wide receiver coming off the board. And ESPN is projecting him with 58 catches, 741 yards, 4 touchdowns. Basically, they're projecting him to be about the 50th best wide receiver in the league. A quarterback, that makes him a quarterback 4 or 5, which means really he's not a guy you want on your fantasy team unless you have a very deep roster. Like you need to start at least 3 wide receiver slots and maybe a flex. That's somewhere where Jaylen Waddle will become relevant. But if you're just in a normal layout where it's just 2 starting wide receiver slots and 1 flex, I wouldn't even look Jaylen Waddle's way. And his ADP again at 140, there's other players I'm going to be targeting at that point in the draft. So anyway, that's what's going on with those guys. So not nearly as excited about those guys, but they're worth keeping an eye on. Let's see what happens during training camp. That's also going to speak to where they're going to be taken and what's going to happen with their projections. Next up, you have at pick number 10, the Philadelphia Eagles took Devonta Smith, another wide receiver. And right now, ESPN has Devonta projected with 63 catches, 842 yards, and 4 touchdowns. That makes him the wide receiver 39, which is outside of flex value, but it's very close. You're right on the cusp of fantasy relevance. So, if he gets 6 touchdowns, yeah, he's a flex player, right? And so it's not that high a bar. Likewise, there's not a lot of competition for targets on that team. Philadelphia had one of the lowest receiving yards by receivers last year. I think it was 2,000 yards for their receivers. So there's nowhere to go but up. And if the quarterback works out and Hurts can prove that he can be a quarterback in this league, I think there's some upside here. But you look at where he's going. Right now he's being picked as the wide receiver 43 at pick number 116. So there is some value. There is a little bit of value there. But he's going at about the same place as Laviska Shenault, who's a guy I've talked about before, who I very much like for the upcoming season. Devontae Parker, Corey Davis. These are, we're at the point in the draft here when you're talking about the one around pick 120 where it's not great options, but I think I'd rather have one of these established players. Truthfully, this is the same thing. I'd rather have an established player on an offense than take a new player coming in raw. And so for that reason, again, I'm not really thrilled with keeping my eyeballs on Devonta Smith. We'll see what happens during training camp, but for right now, I don't think he's worth the pick. Moving on, at pick number 20, you had Kadarius Toney being taken by the New York Jets as their wide receiver. Now, of course, the Giants, they brought in Galladay, so Galladay's their one. And you still have Sterling Shepard there. Golden Tate's gone. But anyway, where is he going to slot in? And I think he's probably going to slot in as the 3. And this is a team that I already have problems trusting the passing volume and the quarterback because of the turnover issue. Right now, ESPN has him projected with 46 catches, 557 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And I call that's tight end level production. There's so many tight ends in this league that get like 50 catches, 500 yards, and 5 touchdowns that they're completely non-fantasy relevant unless they score a touchdown. So these are not guys you want on your team. So again, Kadarius Toney, absolutely not interested in him. The draft board isn't really interested in him either. They have him as the wide receiver 89 coming off the board. So you don't have any league where you need to go have a wide receiver 8 on your bench. It's just not worth it. Don't even bother. He's not a guy you need to worry about. Now, the next guy I want to talk about is, again, another guy I love. Absolutely immediate fantasy value right now. Get him on your list. Najee Harris, running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is an awesome situation, one of those dream type situations that you always hope for with the running backs, and it couldn't be a better place for him to land. ESPN right now has him projected 223 carries for 963 yards, 7 touchdowns, along with 50 catches for 372 yards and another receiving touchdown. That means he's the RB-8 as far as value when you look at the 2020 stats. If he got those stats, he would have been the RB-8 last year. Right now, early projections have him going as the RB-17 at ADP number 33. For me, that is way too early. I think you're going to see this guy move into the first round by the time drafts start. And I got to tell you, I would have no problems taking this guy as my RB-1. Absolutely. And if I can get him as my RB-2, that is just icing on the cake. I would love that. My only concern here when we're talking Pittsburgh is Big Ben. Again, up there in the years, having some real difficulty. He would be the weakest part of this offense right now, Big Ben. But that might mean that they have to lean on Najee Harris even more, and that would be great. So, again, he is an absolute target for you guys. And, again, I would take him in the first round. And I think that's where he's going to be. He's probably going to be like I'm guessing by the time drafts start, 8th or 9th running back coming off the board. But right now, he's sitting at ADP number 33, a 3rd round pick. My God, get him on your team. If you're doing early drafts right now, get him now while you can still get him this cheap, because that's unbelievable value. So anyway, and there was only one other running back taken in the first round, and that was Travis Etienne, who went to Jacksonville. I mentioned him before. And I got to say, man, I do like this pick. And I think this guy is absolutely fantasy relevant, especially in PPR leagues, because he's going to be the pass catcher. Obviously, this does hurt James Robinson's value, who was probably sitting as a second-round player, but now he's dropped down to the RB-29 at ADP number 73 right now. That seems a little bit low, but Travis Etienne is actually ahead of him now, and Etienne is taken as the RB-27 at pick number 68. So these guys are both going at about the same place, and I got to tell you, I'd rather have Etienne, and I'll tell you why. Because they invested a first-round draft pick, massive draft capital to get this guy, whereas James Robinson, awesome year notwithstanding, they have no draft capital on that guy. He was a walk-on. I don't think he was even drafted last year. He had a great season, but we're talking a situation where it's like Philip Lindsay in the Denver Broncos. They never respected him. They never gave him what he could do, and they just dumped him at the first chance. So when his contract was up, they just dumped him and said goodbye. That's kind of the situation that James Robinson is in. But Etienne, right now, the projections have him with 129 carries for 554 yards, 4 touchdowns, along with 58 receptions for 450 yards and 1 receiving touchdown. That means he's valued right now as the RB-18 in half-point PPR leagues, and but he's going as the RB-27 at pick number 68. So that is value. There is big value there, and like I said, I love this pick as well. Not as much as I love Najee Harris, but this is absolutely a guy I would want to get on my team. And I do expect him to move up as well, probably into the 40s or 50s as far as ADP is concerned. But there is a lot of value here. You pair him up with Trevor Lawrence, your quarterback. Oh, I think that could be a good thing. There's some goodness there. So, there's only one other guy in the first round that was taken, a wide receiver. That's Rashod Bateman, who went to Baltimore. And again, it's another situation where he's not a fantasy relevant player. We're talking 40 catches, 506 yards, 4 touchdowns as his projections. So he is not a fantasy draftable player, but I got to tell you what, I think this draft pick helps Hollywood Brown. So that makes me like Hollywood Brown even more, because there's going to be someone else that they have to defend in the passing game. So that means more volume, Brown will be able to get open more, and it will help him. And Brown is a great deal right now on the ADP. He's like going at 96 or 97. So that's a point where I absolutely would take him this year. At that point, I think he's going to have a good year. But that's it for the first round. And really, in the second and third round, looking at it, it was mostly, foundational pieces. Obviously, there was a lot of defensive and offensive line players taken, not a lot of fantasy relevant players. And even the wide receivers, the skill players that were taken, like the wide receivers and tight ends, were mostly coming in as they were basically coming into where they were going to be like the wide receiver 3 or 4 on that team, or a tight end with really good blocking skills. It wasn't anybody really there that I saw that was going to be super relevant for fantasy football. There was only like one guy, Javonte Williams, who Denver picked up. And I'm not even sure how valuable he's going to be this year. I think he is their piece because Melvin Gordon is on the second year of this 2-year contract. I think they're going to eject him at the end of this year, and then it's going to be Javonte Williams' backfield. So, I'm not sure exactly how that's going to play out. Javonte Williams might be worth a pick this year, but not really determined yet. But most of the other guys I looked at, I'm like, geez, it's again 50 catch, 500 yards, 5 touchdown guys, and you don't even need to worry about those guys for fantasy football. They are not worth drafting in any case, in any way, shape, or form. So, but there you go. That's it. That's the first round. It was a great first round. There are some great players here, man. I'm so excited about Trevor Lawrence, Kyle Pitts, and Najee Harris, man, are the 3 names you need to get on your list right now and get them. You go out and do some mock drafts and see where you can get these guys, but just expect that they're all going to move up before the draft starts. But right now, fantastic value. So definitely take advantage of that. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. We're going to have like a normal football season this year. It's going to be fantastic. There's going to be a preseason. There's off-season workouts happening. This is going to help every player on the team. And I got to tell you, this year, more than ever, I think you're going to see some astounding gains by second-year players. Those guys that were rookies last year came in. It was a bad situation, limited practices, limited development, and so it was kind of trial by fire. So I think you're going to see a lot of second-year players really blossom this year, really take over. So I'm going to do a future thing about that as well. But that's just also something to consider. Why I would very much consider second-year players over most of these rookies, except for the big 3, right? But anyway, there you go. So thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And please like, comment, and subscribe down below. Like I said, I will be, I'm going to do another podcast, posting them twice a week now. So anyway, thank you very much. Have yourself a great fantasy day, and I'll talk to you soon.